everyone. Welcome to another episode of ShrinksChat. I'm Monica Burton.
I'm Annette Ryder, and we have Tamera Fontenot back with us, a wonderful hypnosis therapist. And we are excited to kind of talk about hypnosis with you, really understand it at a deeper level, because our listeners are very curious about this practice and what you're doing. So thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I am always happy to talk about this, if only for the purposes that, it's an amazing tool. I am just going to call it the hypnotic arts because there's a lot of aspects of it, but to get it across to people what a wonderful tool this is for change. And to normalize this as an experience, take it off of the movies that we see, and a stage show type of work, that kind of stuff, because it is an amazing tool that just kind of cuts to the chase.
Yeah. Right. When practiced with a licensed clinical therapist of some type, you're not going to feel like you're on a stage. You're actually going to feel like it's a tool in therapy, in counseling practices that can be incredibly effective and make big sweeping changes for people that can really impact their life in a positive way.
Exactly. Unlike what you pick up maybe from stage shows, which are there to, entertain. They're there to entertain. Or, the amazing things that we see in movies, where people become controlled zombies and different things like that. That's not actually what hypnosis is. The reason that kind of lingers and stays around is because what we can do with hypnosis is that powerful. But of course, we've got a lot of fictional licenses that are going with the stuff we see in movies and things. And then, of course, with stage hypnotists, their intent being to entertain, that is going to be done in a very dramatic way. If you've ever been to a good stage show, you'll see 20 people come up on stage and about half of them will go back. Because not everybody's up there to be in that state. If you don't want to be hypnotized, you will not be hypnotized. If you're sitting there going, you can't hypnotize me, I'm going to go, that's a heck of a trance that you're in, So right. I wouldn't even try. When folks come to see me, generally what the deal is, I'll say to them, if there is something consciously you're able to say to yourself, I want to do or think or feel XYZ. Okay. I'm consciously aware of that, but unconsciously I keep doing, ABC over here. I go, that's the time you want to come see me, right? When you're ready, because what we in this field, what we'll say is when the conscious mind and the unconscious are out of rapport. That's where we feel that dysregulation, that discomfort. That's when we keep doing things, right? So while I'm a licensed therapist, have been for 35 years. I've worked in just about every trauma you can think of, I think most of my experience was in the foster care dependency system. So I have a lot of experience there. And then I also have about 10 years work in disaster recovery. So a lot of trauma experience. And when I say that, these tools, it's a wonderful thing sometimes to come in and just talk. I love talking. Talking's a good thing. However, this world, sometimes we kind of have to realize that when we're just talking, we're repeating and we're actually kind of concretizing our narratives and the way we understand it. Again, don't misunderstand me. There's true value in that, like just having your story heard or talking through things. But when people are really ready to make a shift or a change in something, and they can identify that something, these tools bypass that conscious chatter that you've been doing forever, and cut straight down to the core of it. That's our goal, to that unconscious part. And the thing is that when the conscious and the unconscious are out of rapport, guess who always wins? The unconscious.
Yeah.
Always. I don't want to eat that cookie. I really want to lose weight. My whole life is contingent upon losing weight. And yet I eat the cookie, right? The unconscious always wins. I love folks who come to me and say, I quit smoking without hypnosis and they've got an extra 40 pounds. I go, I can tell. You just substituted one behavior for another, whereas with hypnosis, if someone genuinely wants to change, and sometimes the motivation is the beginning, to really get that motivation amped up. If they want to, they can come in, and it's sometimes as simple as a single session. They really do just not want to smoke.
Mhm.
I've had people with 4-pack-a-day habits just stop.
Mhm.
Because we get down to that unconscious and get it on board with the goal, and it's just an easy thing to do.
Mhm.
So so all that said, what is hypnosis? You know,
Right.
what is hypnosis? And what I like to explain to people is that sometimes people will come up and they'll go, well, I don't know if I was hypnotized. And I'll go, well, what do you think hypnosis feels like? And I never thought about it like that. And I'll go, well, listen, we all go into trance states all day long.
Mhm.
When you're brushing your teeth, you know,
Mhm.
when you're driving your car and you go, oh my goodness, did I stop at that stop sign? I don't remember. You
Right.
know, you're driving along on the highway, you're singing a song and you're there, but you're not there. That place right before you fall asleep, we call it the hypnagogic state. That's actually the name for it, where you're there and the phone rings and you go, I don't think I'm going to answer that because it just feels so much better to keep my eyes closed. These are all brainwave patterns that are created by certain situations that are going on in our world, right?
Right.
So meditation can do it. Prayer can do it. I would argue, and I know that most of the people, professionals in the field, would argue that these are all brainwave pattern states that we can induce in an office or that occur naturally.
Mhm.
I would tell you that trauma is a hypnotic state or a trance state.
Mhm.
Isn't that moment, like if you were to define hypnosis, when you take a class in it or read a book, it'll say, it's this very selective awareness, a very internalized focus. And in that moment, we sort of step aside all those filters that are dictating what aspects of reality we're paying attention to.
Mhm.
See, I would argue that anybody who sits on the couch during a commercial at night is in a type of trance as well. And the advertisers know that because they're doing the same things I do.
Right. Yeah. They're trying to get you to think about eating
Right.
a burger or driving somewhere and picking something up,
That's exactly it.
and then all of a sudden you are thinking about that the next
Mhm.
day, or
That's
right,
it.
or you have an idea like, oh, I should go here, and you haven't gone there.
You're like,
And you have,
suddenly.
and sometimes
So
I'm like, why am I thinking that? I'm like, oh my gosh, commercials again. Oh, the commercials got me.
Mhm.
that's exactly it. And so we can just understand that trance or these states exist all around us. They're really not, I tell people all the time, you're not going to be dancing like Shakira. You're not going to cluck like a chicken. That's not my goal in here. Not that if you were the kind of person that would do that on a stage, wonderful, that's great, but that's not my goal in here. When
Mhm.
you come in here, my first goal, it's kind of unusual, I do with people, but I don't think I've ever experienced, it's not the way I was trained, but I tell people when they come in, when you leave here today, what do you want to have? For your time and your money, how would you like to be different?
Yeah.
Well, it's
Good, we can go there.
yeah. Well, even that in and of itself is starting to put them in a trance, right?
It absolutely is.
Thinking differently. Tamara, you were our first guest on our podcast way back when COVID kind of like first hit. So as we're talking about trance, I was thinking about this constant state of fight or flight, like chronic stress that a lot of us have been in for, almost 3 years.
Yes.
It does. And it's a detriment to our emotional and our physical bodies. And so, one of the things that I love about hypnosis is that you do teach your body how to like regulate itself.
Exactly.
So just kind of, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more to that, like to our audience, kind of noticing that, sometimes you get to this point of chronic stress where you don't even notice that you're in that fight or flight state. And so when you have a moment of like peace, it feels uncomfortable.
That is so true, isn't it? Yeah. I had someone saying that just yesterday. That's a weird feeling. Like, I've been this way for 50 years. And I go, if you don't stop, you're going to wind up with cancer.
Right.
Coming to that in a very mind-body way, that's the idea. Most people, when they come and they're in distress and they are thinking that, boy, if I could get my mind in sync, then everything would fall together. And, I know I'm preaching to the choir when I speak to you guys, but to say, actually, if it's much simpler and more pragmatic for us to focus on the body first, right? A relaxed body is a relaxed mind. That's it. So when we go into that fight or flight, which again is a kind of state, we really could talk more about states of being, right? They come and they go, but this chronic state of fight or flight, this arousal that we've all been in. I saw a report this morning that said 90% of Americans in a survey said, yes, America's having a mental health crisis, We're having a mental health crisis. Teaching people how to access that state, to come to their body first, whether it's through trance, like hypnosis or meditation or mindfulness, or a lot of other bilateral strategies. I love to teach people these strategies to get the body into a more relaxed state. If we do decide to do a little trance today, that's kind of the idea, is that if we get our bodies relaxed first, we stop that hyper focus on the dysregulation and all the stuff that's going on around us, all the problems and the challenges. We can step out then into a bigger perspective, and your unconscious will help dictate what needs to happen next. Relax the body, the mind will follow.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so often with anxiety or even depression, sometimes if you can start with some type of body movement.
That's exactly it.
Then the body,
because the mind and body are one.
Right. Yeah. And then the body kind of connects with the mind, and then you can get somewhere. You can get some movement going. And when I say movement, I mean change, right?
Change. Yeah.
Right. Not necessarily just physical movement. So I think that makes really reasonable sense. And I also think talking about how hypnosis is already something that you are doing.
You were already doing it. I tell them, I'm not here to put you to sleep. I'm here to wake you up.
Right.
I like that.
You're in a trance. You're living as if what you are doing is absolute reality, and your perception of it is such.
Right.
And it's keeping you stuck. Right? Keeping you stuck, and you're just going through it and reinforcing it. I love to train everyone and help them understand how that fight or flight comes from these intense emotional experiences repeated over time. Once you have those intense experiences and the thoughts and feelings and behaviors become a part of who you are, then you are living from that perceptual bias. It's as if, like, if you're driving down the highway, you look and there's cars that you see all around you, but the cars that you really see are the ones that you drive, the ones you want to drive or have driven.
Right.
But there's all these other cars out there. And because you can't live outside of your own head. It's kind of interesting until you get outside of your own head.
Yeah, right. Until you go there.
That's
right.
it.
No, it's like that thing you like. I recently bought a new car, and I notice my car everywhere. And I never saw this car ever before.
Exactly. We're walking in our trance of our own perceptual biases. Right. And so our realities are being reflected. It's kind of like there's what is, and then the aspects of ourselves based on our own experiences and who we are, that we are allowing ourselves to see. I mean, it's even like this presentation. Doesn't matter how many people listen to it, everyone who hears it will hear something a little different based on their experiences. That's their trance.
Right.
I was thinking, as we're talking, a couple months ago, Esther Perel put out this thing about freedom. Like, what's the meaning of freedom? And it was a really great newsletter that she put out. But as we're talking, I'm thinking, like, this word freedom is like popping up. It almost feels like breaking out of the trance gives us a different kind of freedom. Even like buying the new car, because you guys know I bought a new car too, a little bit before Annette, but it's like this freedom of not worrying about when the car is going to break down. Or I feel like hypnosis, you guys know my kids play sports. So that parachute run where you put the parachute on your back and you run. I don't know if you guys have ever done it, but I've tried it with the boys just to prove, like, Mom can do this too. And it was really hard. A lot harder than what I anticipated. But I feel like when we feel stuck emotionally, like unhealthy patterns, stuck in relationships, or just stuck, I feel like it's like that parachute. You have to use all of your body and you have to tell yourself, run really fast. You're moving in slow motion. And times like with hypnosis, when I've done it before, it's been that freedom. It's like, oh, I can just run fast.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, without the heaviness.
Uh-huh.
You know, does
I
that make
love this.
sense?
It makes total sense. And
It's
what's really kind of interesting and really gets down into this, when we talk about talk therapy, it's kind of out here, and we're hoping that it's going to create a felt sense in the body. That felt sense, that's the unconscious, right? Your body is your unconscious. If in a state, if I can get into a state and I can experience that, it becomes a felt sense in my body. That's the unconscious accessing that. And I tell people it's like the difference between talking about riding a bike and riding a bike. It's a feeling. And when you get it, it paradigm shifts.
Right.
Stuff changes.
I love the way we're talking about this concept. I'm thinking just yesterday, I was talking with a client about how do we alert ourselves to our own blind spots, right? Which is what you're saying, we're all walking a trance of our own perceptual biases, which are the blind spots that make me not see the car I now own. And now all I can see is these cars. And I realize everybody owns this car. I thought it was my unique car because I never saw it before, but or a unique color car, right? Like,
right.
Right. So we are all thinking there's something unique, and then we find out, oh, but that's kind of what good therapy does. And I think what hypnosis hits the nail on the head, it helps you see that blind spot finally, which was always visual, but like, how your partner can see parts about you, and you're like, that's not me. And then all of a sudden you finally see yourself, and I'm like, oh crap, that's me.
That's me. And now I feel it, and now wonderful things can happen, right?
Right. I can choose it. I can be free with it finally. I have free will finally. That's what I think freedom is, to finally have free will over something, which means it's not hidden from myself.
That's exactly it. That's beautiful. Yeah. You want to write that one down too. That's quotable. That's lovely. So yeah, that's exactly that's the idea, right? There's a lot of ways that we do that. Now, I like to distinguish, there's hypnosis, and then there's hypnotherapy. So I like to make a little kind of like a distinction there. Hypnosis, for a lot of it's let's put the entertainment and different aspects like that aside. When we're talking about the clinical way of doing that work, it can be as simple as creating an induction, right? All hypnosis sessions are going to have an induction. Then they're going to have a deepener. You think about it, most meditations do too. Okay, they do. They have an induction, a deepener, and then they'll have what we call the treatment. And the treatment in that traditional hypnosis is whatever. Like, let's say if I'm working with an athlete who wants to improve performance, maybe once they get into the state where they're in that kind of place where they're just very involved in themselves, and I'm going to offer them imagery, words, different direction, maybe suggestions about how they can improve performance. You do this, that, whatever it is. And in that state, it's a learning state. I've said earlier, intensity and repetition. Well, when you're in that state and you're traditional, in hypnosis, we call it a critical factor, but it's those perceptual filters, right? When we step those outside a little bit and we can offer that kind of a treatment in there, it's amazing. It just sort of happens, right? We just sort of learn it. Now you can do mental rehearsal, say in sports performance, without it, but most professional athletes do use some form of this, and they may not call it hypnosis, they might call it sports meditation or something like that, but it's the same thing: induction, deepen, and then we're going to offer that. Right. Sometimes it's something simple, like someone who wants to do, they want to be more comfortable in social situations. They want to speak better. They want to X, Y, and we can really just do it that way and offer it to them. And I work with a lot of people on single sessions, it's that simple. And it's just like the smoking. If in fact they really want to, everything in them wants to, and they can move past I'm pretty good at helping people get comfortable with the process. But if they can move past that aspect, boom, it just happens. It's amazing. I love it. People go, well, I don't know if it was a hypnosis, but I just shaved a few points off my game. And I'll go, I don't know. Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tiger Woods used hypnosis to become the performer he is today. I love it when he talks about it. But a lot of people do. Then there's hypnotherapy, and hypnotherapy is a little bit different. In hypnotherapy, what we're really doing is we are helping people to access, again, I'm going to go to states, right, that are more emotional. They're felt senses in the body. I still do a lot of traditional, we call them regression techniques. I use a lot of different strategies for it, but where, like, if someone has a feeling that's just been there for them, and it's been there for them, anger, sadness, anxiety, these are chronic things. And what we can do is we tap into that feeling, because they know the feeling, they've had it. I mean, for a long time, and I'm really good at kind of amping that up for them a little bit. What's amazing is that the unconscious, if you're holding that right, structuring it right, you can help them move back to where it began.
Okay.
Okay. Now we can do this in talk therapy. We can do this with EMDR. We can do a lot of this stuff and other stuff. What's really cool about hypnosis is that you can do it so quickly, right? And it's such a beautiful thing. You guys will appreciate it. But I mean, when you take someone back and there's some experience, you'd be, you're not surprised to hear it usually happens before the age of 10, somewhere's in there. People get stuck in something. They have an experience. I like to tell people, you came into the world a perfect little happy baby, smiling, doing everything babies do. And then you started walking and talking, and people started saying no. And then there was all this judgment, and you're a good girl, a bad girl, whatever, whatever you are. All these things start happening, and we make judgments, and I am, the world is, life is, love is, people are, family is, all the things that we do. They become those perceptual biases that we continue to repeat over and over again. So when we are using a technique like this, you're having an experience. So say in a relationship, you have certain feelings that come up frequently. Whoosh, we can go back and find where these things began, those initial sensitizing events, and help re-educate the unconscious. Again, I know that's the goal of all therapy. It really is. But it's such an amazing thing to go back. These people, I'm not enough. I wasn't good enough. All the stuff that we do naturally and normally, not because we're broken, but because we're human beings. And re-educate it. No, I am worthy. I am worthwhile. I do matter. Maybe my parents just couldn't do it right, or, whatever, get to that place. It's all the healthy stuff we would do in traditional therapy, but we're cutting through the words to just deal with the feelings. That's crazy. People will open their eyes and I see 10 years come off their face. I'll have to go look in the mirror. I want you to look in the mirror and see it. Because we are carrying all of it. I go back to Bessel van der Kolk, right? The body keeps the score.
Right.
Right. And it is all in there. We've been carrying it all along. I threw out the thing about my client yesterday with, keep doing that, you're going to have cancer. But the truth is, we understand that the tightness and the tension, the traumas, all the things that happen, we carry them if we don't heal them. And that can create physiological problems that really become large.
Yeah, it is amazing. As a talk therapist primarily, I know that there's part of all talk therapy, and maybe some of the best therapists have natural abilities to work on this hypnosis aspect in therapy, whether they know they're doing it or not.
Sure.
But I can see sometimes that you can finally hit that point, and then the emotional and the feelings and the connection happens. And then all of a sudden, this work that seemed like impossible to do, or never going to happen for them, or they're never going to get there, all of a sudden it's like doors open, the floodgates open, and they're through it.
That's it.
And it's like that break that you're talking about. And sometimes what happens though too, from my take as a therapist, is I can't get that to happen. I do all my techniques and my tools and I work really hard, and their efforts want it to happen too. And then I make the decision to, like, hey, why don't you go try Tamera?
And here's the thing,
therapy. Let's try something and see if we can't break this up a little bit.
That's it.
We connect it, and then you can have the life you want. You can leave this baggage of carrying this story of yourself that's horrific, and it was horrible, but you can leave it behind and move on with the real story of you.
Exactly. Or in my world, create a whole new one if you'd like, right? Because we're completely free to do that. I'm going to go back to Monica's freedom. We're completely free. It's an amazing thing. The minute you realize that that's the truth. So sometimes I'll say the conscious mind didn't create the problem.
Right.
So the conscious mind can't always solve it. It can do things and get you there, but it's got to get in there. And so that's exactly it, Annette. That's exactly it. This is why you always make such great referrals. Because, I mean, people like one of the myths in hypnosis is you must be weak-minded to be hypnotized, and that's not true.
Yeah.
Or people who are saying, I can't be hypnotized. I mean, look, my favorite clients to work with are the ones who have done the work. And they do consciously understand this, but they just can't move the feeling. And the feeling keeps coming. And I'm going, you already have, because I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm not walking your life. I'm not living your life. What I'm doing is I'm holding the structure that allows that part of you that knows it can be different, but doesn't know how to move out of the way and let a part of you that is brilliant and creative and self-healing come up and do the answers for you. I'm not here to tell you how to think. I mean, so that's hypnosis. I'll tell you what to think. But because you've asked me to, right? But in hypnotherapy, it's more like we're letting this amazing part inside of us that really does already know how to be healthy and heal. But it's just been wounded or hurt or, something's gotten in the way. And it comes up and it does the work for us.
I think there's a chapter in the book called My Subconscious Made Me Do It.
I love that. Well, of course it did.
Yes.
Not me.
The book is You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. I don't know if you guys
I haven't read that one yet.
It's a really good book, but in this whole chapter, she talks about like what we're saying. The answer is there. You tell yourself, it's like you give these mixed messages and you like, I don't want this cookie, and then you're eating the cookie.
Absolutely.
That's
exactly it. Well, it's kind of fun. I'll say this to you because I think it's helpful for people to understand. Your unconscious, like I said, it always wins. Yeah, it's deep. It's back there. I remember being about my third year of hypnosis training. And, that's the thing. Hypnosis does take, I know a lot of therapists have taken some training in hypnosis, and anybody can read a script, but it's to get into the real art of it requires a little bit more time and energy and training. Monica, I think you said something earlier. I definitely want to tag in about how there are some therapists who actually just kind of do it, right? It's really the art of influence, of helping shift people, a little bit, NLP, and some of your listeners may not know, neuro-linguistic programming is kind of an offshoot from the hypnosis field, and it was based on looking at some of the best therapists that there were out there and how they structured their language and their work to create the change they did.
Right.
Fritz Perls, I think Virginia Satir, and Milton Erickson. So a good therapy does do a lot of this. Meditation does a lot of this. It's opening up to that part of ourselves. What you have to have is someone you trust to hold that for you, to guide it without doing it in I mean, the hallmark of hypnosis is there's some suggestibility there, right? You think about it, there's some suggestibility there. So it's very important when people are doing that kind of work, especially the clinical work, that they are not suggestive. But
yeah, I think that's one of the, I refer people to you all the time too. And one of the things that I hear sometimes besides I don't want to bark like a dog in session is when it's for hypnotherapy, it's the fear of, well, what if there's a memory that I don't know, or that the false memory, thing. And so what do you say?
Oh, I definitely want to address it. Listen, I do I do regression type work, probably 10 to 15 of those a week. Have done that for about 15 years now. And in all of that time, I've had 2 bona fide hidden memories. Okay. What I like to say to people is that those are usually pretty extreme situations, and those people are struggling in ways that present out here,
Right.
and they're going to know it. Most of the things that we struggle with are things that we do in fact remember, although we may not necessarily associate them with what we think. Like I work with a lot of therapists. I love it because they go, I've analyzed this 1,000 times and still have this problem. And I'll go, look, let's come in, let's do this little bit of work. And they'll go, well, I know what it is. I know what it is. And I go, oh, okay, maybe you're right. I'm going to get totally out of the way, but they'll go back and then they'll say something like, well, is this the first time you've ever had this feeling? Yes or no? And of course, when they're in that state and they're very involved, it's so fun. Most of them will raise their eyebrows and go, no, now let's go a little farther back because it actually started much earlier than that you had that initial sensitizing event. Most people do remember, they just don't associate it with the problem because it's become such a part of who they are that, that said, here's the other thing. I tell people it's usually in this life, all of us have plenty to work with, no matter how wonderful your parents were or your education. And I always go, of course hypnosis works. Your first hypnotist was your mom, and then your school, then your church, then your community, your times, because we're being patterned, programmed by all of it, all the time.
That's a really good point, is that people know where the origin is. They just don't associate with the problem. So they've intellectualized it. And again, this is part of their perception bias that you already mentioned, that they have this idea, like they have this big problem. I have this problem and this is what my problem is. And when you go, wow, does this feeling remind you of anything from your past? They go, no, not really. And then sometimes I let that just sit out there in the session for a while, but then all of a sudden I'll look over at them and they're crying and I'm like, what's going on? And of course now they're like, it has to do with this, really? This again, like, so, I think you're right that sometimes that can come out in talk therapy, but which is why you want to get referred, I think, sometimes to a hypnosis therapist from a provider who knows, who's good in the area. Doctors know you, me and Monica know you. We find those people that are good and we refer to the right people who are much more qualified and trained to do this process. So that is something for people outside of Florida who can't come to you, but would love to, I'm sure. To think about too is like, think about the referral. But before we go on, guys, we have got to we're so enjoying this. We're not taking a break. So let's thank our sponsors. We'll be right back in a few minutes. Can't wait to talk more with Tamera.
Thank you, dear.
The art of hypnosis, the breakdown of understanding what hypnosis is, hypnotherapy, and those questions that people might have, and feel free to tag some of those on our Instagram post or on our Facebook page, and we can get those over to Tamera and make sure we get the right answers posted back up for you if we don't know them. Because I think people have a lot of questions about this, and that's
I do.
Yeah,
it's fun. I'll tell you, I've wanted to do this work since I was 7. I didn't realize I used to be so envious of people who always knew what they wanted to do. And the truth is, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a hypnotist. I love comic books, and it would be in the back of the comic book, get your x-ray glasses, learn hypnosis, and I'm from Louisiana, where they would do stage shows as, part of the elementary school assemblies and things, mentalism things. I thought that was always really cool, but it just goes to prove the point. At the time, I'm getting on in years now, so that was a while back. In Louisiana, hypnosis was not considered a legitimate. It wasn't legitimate. I said I wanted to be a hypnotist. My dad, one of my favorite hypnotists, looked at me and said, "That's not a real job." So it's interesting. I held that. I put that in my head. This isn't a real thing. It's fun. It's a hobby, but it's not something you make a living at. It's not something it's just, it's extracurricular. I took that with me into college when I went to study psychology, and I would speak about it to professors, and they would, that's not real therapy. Let's talk about the DSM and blah 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 blah. And I continued to believe that. And like a lot of people, that trance kind of staying in my mind, even as I was training all the time with vocational, we call them vocational practitioners, people who aren't licensed, because there are some really good ones out there. But I always caution people, because like in the state of Florida, you can read a book and become a hypnotist. There's no regulating around that. They may even call themselves a hypnotherapist. There's no regulation around that. It's not the same in every state. Some states are stricter about that. But that being said, here I am, a therapist studying hypnosis, and I'm still hypnotized to believe that it's not a viable therapeutic method until I hit a wall. And that's the thing. Like at 45, I was in Washington, D.C. doing disaster recovery on a nationwide basis. And I hit a wall there and just decided that was not a good fit for me. And I came home and I kind of sat around and meditated for a few months and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I decided to invest my time and energies in becoming a hypnotist, or at least I didn't want to leave this life not having tried. And suddenly I became aware of how ridiculously I had been hypnotized to believe that this was not a viable thing. And I'm like, this is the most amazing tool ever, and it is. It's not the only tool. And I really want to emphasize that. It's not the only tool, but it is a wonderful tool for making change happen rapidly. And, one of the things I'm really adamant about doing in my office is helping people to understand what it is and teaching them how to use it for themselves.
Right.
Right.
Well, they already are doing it. So
yeah, exactly. Let's be conscious about it.
Right. They might be doing it negatively too, regularly. Right.
Mostly they are. Right. Mostly they are. That's what we tell people. You have a negative cognitive bias. If I say 9 nice things about you, one's a little negative, which one will you remember a year from now? Right. Our minds are wired for survival. The avoidance of pain and staying alive is what matters most. And that's how those biases and all that stuff gets in there, the things that are limiting to us, the fear. But that said, if you understand it, I really want people to understand the idea of intensity and repetition and how they can begin to do things, like people like affirmations. I love affirmations, or affirmations, which are questions that generate your unconscious to give you good answers, but I love those. Repetition, that's what that is. But you need intensity too. Right. And if it works, like we think about like trauma, for example, we're going through this experience with Hurricane Ian here in Florida and across everywhere. Intensity. When we are in those experiences like that, those things go in. Boom, we don't need a repetition. One thing is all we need, and bam, it's in there. And we're telling ourselves stuff about it. Right. People might hear things, I can't handle this. I can't breathe. This is too much. We're going through that. We're basically setting those patterns in our brains. And everything around us is going to reinforce it. You know, I can't get any help, blah, 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 whatever it is. If you understand that intensity and repetition are how these things get in there, and that it is natural and normal for our brains to go to the negative first as a matter of survival. But here's the truth. Most of the things in our world are not life and death. We're simply responding to them as if they are.
Right.
And if we understand that intensity and repetition is how we get what we get, then it only stands to reason that we can do the same for building ourselves in a new way. Right?
Right.
We can create new realities for ourselves through intensity and repetition. Right? So I like to teach people how to integrate that repetition into their lives very easily.
Mhm.
If I ask folks, do you have triggers that take you into that automatic unconscious behavior? And they'll go, oh yeah, I can tell you all about them. And it goes, so what trigger do you have to take you into a better space? And they'll go, alcohol, or something. They don't. That was never discussed. I have a lot of therapists who come in, I'll start teaching them this, and they'll go, my God, why didn't they tell us this in school? I'm like, I don't know, but now.
Right. Well, I always try to talk about how all habits are habits, right? Bad habits and good habits are just repetition. And in fact, in the brain that has the habit stored to do, it doesn't really discern. That part of the brain isn't discerning. Is this a good thing for me to do or a bad thing for me to do? It's just a thing I do.
That's it.
Like, people didn't brush their teeth. We brush our teeth because our mom and dad hypnotize us through pain and agony and repetition beyond belief to brush your teeth when you're a kid, right? Because we now know it's a healthy habit, which we call that, but it isn't really something as a human species. You don't see cave paintings of people not liking the grit on their teeth or thinking their breath smells bad.
That's right.
That's all learned habit that keeps us doing something that's good for our bodies, which and now scientifically we know is good. But we actually think like maybe we're, as a species, human animals or people who want to brush their teeth. Well, you don't see cats and dogs brushing their teeth, or any animal with an opposable thumb brushing their teeth, I guess I should say. So it's just habit.
It's habits. And of course, the habits that come most naturally to us are the ones that have to do with pain. Pain, fear, death, anything I don't want to have.
Right.
Those are the ones that come quickly, but they're not always the most useful.
Right.
That's it. So we can learn to develop habits that create spaces within ourselves that allow us to access more, I like to call it more resourceful states. Right? All emotions, I don't judge them. They're not good or bad. We have non-judgment. They are either just useful in the situation or they're not. That's it. Am I in a resourceful state or not in a resourceful state? So it's kind of interesting when we do these inductions, we do these deepenings. What's happening is we're putting people into a state that is more resourceful. It's broader, it's bigger, it's not hyper focused, it's into these things, and from that space something new can come up.
Right. So maybe like a limited state versus a resourceful state.
Yeah,
right. I see this. Okay, that makes really good sense to put it that way. I like that. That helps break it down, because we're in it. We're in some state. It's just
always
right.
That's it.
Right? Fear or love. I say to them, is this fear or love?
That's it. I love it. Fear, love, sympathetic, parasympathetic, right? It's the same thing. It's really the same thing. We're either okay or we're not okay, right?
Am I limited? Am I resourceful? Right. Okay. Fair
that's
enough.
You got it.
Yeah. I like, is it useful?
Yeah, is it useful? That's it. Is it useful? That takes all the judgment out of it right there. Okay. I had someone today who had a heartbreak. She had a heartbreak, and she's been a couple months, and something came up today, and the tears finally came. And she was judging herself for having not cried before. And I'm like, you get some other things going on. I think that was a pretty useful way for you to be, but here this is now, and now we're here. And this is an appropriate and useful place for you to be today. I know you won't be here in 2 months. If you are, then we're going to bring you in and do something different. But today, for you to cry is okay. And for you to have not cried when you didn't cry because it wasn't the time for you. It wasn't useful for you at that time. It's okay. She had other things going on.
Right. The non-judgmental piece of this, I think that's really huge. I love that idea. Years ago, I worked with a Montessori teacher who was also a Buddhist nun, and she would say, there is no bad behavior. It's just, where is that behavior appropriate?
That's it.
Like, where is yelling appropriate? It's an outdoor voice, not an indoor voice. It's a great emergency voice. It's an attention-seeking voice.
That's it. That's it.
Right.
That's exactly it.
When is yelling a good idea? Right. There's obviously places where yelling works.
That's what I tell them. Sometimes it's appropriate to go into fight or flight,
Right.
If your boundaries are being crossed and there's not another, that's a time to do that. So, yeah. But there are other states. That's the thing. People kind of think that they're the victims of this, that it's the stuff that's happening out there, and they spend all this energy trying to dictate what's going on out there so that they can be okay. And, they come here and we're going to say, let's turn that around, because I think if you can learn to be okay, it doesn't matter what's happening out here. And you can learn to have power. We would call that emotional intelligence, right? So you can see how it all kind of bleeds in. I mean, the whole, hypnosis, again, is a tool. It's a state of mind where that learning can happen, but we can start to develop the ability and the skills to be in charge of the state. Right? I say, if World War III happens, stand behind me. My head will be clear as a bell. But I practice it every day through repetition and intensity, right? Repetition and intensity. We may have chatted about this a little bit when we met back when, but it's something that even clients, they come in here and I'm like, let's talk about it. I know we probably won't have time to do that trance today that I had talked about, but the idea of talking about what anchoring is, I don't know if we did it then, but I love to talk about anchoring, because it's how people can begin to take charge, right, of the state that they're in. However that happens, like you think about it, we walk through our days, we've got these perceptual filters that are monitoring everything and the things that we think are important, and understanding we have that negative cognitive bias that's going, what's the next problem, the next problem, the next problem, no matter what's going on.
Right.
We can integrate like the practice of mindfulness, which is, just being aware sometimes, whether it's, to be silent or even to mindfully notice what's right. What's right in your world?
What's working, right? What's working is always a good thing to focus on. Heck, our computers are working really well right now, so we're able to record the show.
That's it.
Is working right now, so that's good, right?
That's it.
A lot of things that are working. My voice is working, right? Our pens are working, right? So we have a lot working.
That's it. We can turn our attention there and focus on it. I had to laugh. I've been sharing with clients. I'm going, a few weeks ago, because it only happened, and it doesn't happen often. I came to the office and I had green lights all the way here.
Woohoo!
I know. It seems like such a little thing, and it is a little thing, but it's the sort of thing our brains tend to just skip over, right? What's the next problem? But instead, what I did, which comes from NLP, is I anchored that in. Now, this is what I mean by that, is that for that moment, as soon as I've mindfully had the awareness, I'm like, that is great, green lights. It's a feeling, it's not like it's not a moment, but it's a feeling, green lights, that smooth, everything going well feeling. The words don't even begin to capture it. But if I can tap into that feeling for just a moment, and then I want to anchor it in, I want to attach it. This is straight up conditioning. It's Pavlovian conditioning. I had a client the other night. She goes, oh, she trains dogs. She goes, you mean my breath becomes my clicker? I'm like, yes, that's it. Your breath, you're creating a clicker. Now a traditional hypnotist, let's say a traditional hypnotist who maybe does smoking cessation, and they take that person in and they go, that's it, from now on you're a non-smoker, and it feels so good, you just can't imagine anything else. You feel that feeling, wonderful, feel that feeling. I want you to put your fingers together in an okay sign and say rosebud 3 times. The clinical research says it takes about 10 seconds for us to make the link between something, a stimulus, and the experience, right? So that's what they're doing in that session. They're going, they call it a post-hypnotic trigger, right? Or post-hypnotic suggestion. And it says anytime you feel the least bit of an urge to, or thought of having a cigarette, you're going to put your fingers together, say rosebud 3 times. You'll instantly remember that you are a non-smoker, and it feels so good you would never do that to yourself again. Right. So that's really nice. Of course, a lot of those guys want you to come back for every problem. And I'm about teaching you how to do it. I want to teach you how to do it, and then say, you can do this all day long.
Right.
It's a mindfulness practice, but it's also a kind of self-hypnosis. It's repatterning your own brain. And you don't need a hypnotist to do that. I teach people to use diaphragmatic breathing, that anchor breathing. I call it anchor breathing. And I'll say to them very specifically, breathing in through the nose, belly comes out. When you exhale through the mouth, gently, not Lamaze, bring the belly in. Of course, if you just do that 6 to 10 times throughout the day. Like, again, we were talking about the hurricane. If I could, I would say to all of them, please, 6 to 10 times a day, just stop and take 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths.
Right.
You know? Because you're going to lower the fight or flight that's in your body right now. You're hyper vigilant because of the experiences. Your body's flooded with those hormones and neurotransmitters, and no amount of thinking is going to get that different. Okay.
Right. No.
It's not. What you got to do is begin to regulate your body. So you want to just 10 seconds, 3 deep diaphragmatic breaths, 6 to 10 times a day. It's like a muscle. And the more that you do that, the more that's going to bring down that fight or flight generally in the body, which is going to allow you to have some other experiences besides that hyperarousal. But then we can take it a step further. If you want to take hypnosis, you know, you want to have the self-hypnosis. What's really amazing is that, like, if I take my green lights, I can take that big deep breath for just a moment, feel that feeling, and say on the exhale, green lights. If I do that 3 times, a minimum of 3 times, 10 seconds, what happens is that my mind body begins to associate that feeling with my deep breath. Okay? I'm retraining it. I don't have to remember green lights. I do this all day long, right? I do it before I get out of bed. I do it. The last thought on my mind is I take those 3 deep breaths, and I'm going to focus on something that I want my brain to focus on all night.
Right.
And I'll take those 3 deep breaths. It doesn't matter what the word is. It's the point of bringing my attention and my awareness very mindfully to a more resourceful state.
Right.
Okay.
And you can do this outside, folks. Everybody can do this. You have this ability. And you can also call Tamera and get in with her too. Listen, if we've left you more hungry for this chat by the end here, good, then you've been listening, because I'm on bated breath and I just want you to start breathing with me, and I want to go on your green light journey. Rosebud, you got me. You had me, right?
Yeah.
We do have to wrap up, and we want to keep coming back for more and listening into what Tamera has to say. We're going to put some of her resources up on our pages, and follow us, like us, ask questions. We're here for you. Wow. You're a powerhouse, lady.
I love what I do. I love what I do. I love what I do, and I'll never get bored.
Yes.
The mind's amazing, isn't it? So thank you both. I really appreciate you, and I hope you know that. And
thank you, Tamera.
Wonderful work out there. So keep it up, and anchor that in. Okay?
Yes, thank you, Tamera. Thanks everyone for listening, and don't forget to take your 6 to 10 deep breaths today.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, ladies.